I watch you, always studying my movements, seeking the key, the method, the secret technique. Man, I see that hunger, that intensity in your eyes. But listen, there is something I have not expressed, even to my closest students. What you believe about success is likely the very obstacle preventing it. You find this strange? Consider this. The mind itself sets up the boundaries. Your limitations create your boundaries, not outside forces. You. I remember yesterday, I performed a simple punch, like this one I've done since I was 13 years old in Hong Kong. But suddenly it was different. Not the movement, my perception of it. I saw not one path, but many paths of energy flowing simultaneously. Like water taking multiple channels, yet remaining one current. Do not mistake the finger pointing to the moon for the moon itself. Most martial artists are focused on the finger and thus miss all that heavenly glory, you understand? Empty your cup. If your cup is already full, how can you put anything in it? You must first empty your mind of all the preset patterns, the accumulated knowledge that has solidified within you. You know how I always say, I don't believe in styles anymore. Why? Because style is a crystallization. The moment you crystallize into a pattern, you are not free to change, man. Today, I will share what I've kept private. Not techniques, not methods, but the root understanding that transcends all technique, beyond Jikundo even, the philosophy beneath the philosophy. This is not about how to kick or how to punch. This is about the relationship between the kicker and the kick, the puncher and the punch, the unity that renders the division obsolete. Be like water, my friend. But understand that most see only the surface of what this means. Water doesn't just flow. Water penetrates. Water nourishes. Water responds to every container, yet is bound by none. Here is my challenge to you. Can you investigate not just the path to success, but question what success is? Can you honestly express yourself without lying to yourself? Because ultimately, all knowledge is self-knowledge. To know oneself is to study oneself in action with another person. Are you ready? Then let us begin. But remember, absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, and add what is specifically your own. You know what most people want to hear? How I broke into Hollywood. How I became famous. The secret to my success. But let me tell you something. I've never shared this publicly. Success is neither achievement nor self-improvement, but conscious evolution. What do I mean? Listen carefully. When I landed my role in The Green Hornet, people congratulated me. Bruce, you've made it. Hollywood contracts, magazine covers, fan mail piling up. I had succeeded, according to every outside measure. But alone in my room after those long studio days, I felt strangely incomplete, empty, like I was playing a role off-screen as well as on it. I had achieved something external, but internally, something was missing. I remember one night after filming, I was exhausted, sitting in my apartment looking at a magazine with my face on the cover. Strange feeling, man. There I was, Bruce Lee the star, yet I felt divided. The person they were celebrating wasn't fully me. It was an image, a projection, a shadow. That night I wrote in my journal. External achievement without internal growth is like building a house with no foundation. I realized I had focused so much on being recognized that I had neglected the deeper evolution of my consciousness. You see, in martial arts, if your technique advances but your understanding doesn't, you create a dangerous imbalance. The same is true in life. When your external achievements outpace your internal development, you feel that division, that hollowness that no amount of success can fill. I discovered that external recognition without internal evolution creates a division that no achievement can bridge. This was a turning point for me. I began to see that true progress isn't measured by what you accumulate or accomplish, not by trophies or contracts or even recognition. It's measured by how consciously you evolve, how aware you become, how completely you express your unique nature. Most people misunderstand me when I say express yourself honestly. They think I'm talking about showing your emotions or speaking your mind. No, no, no. I'm talking about something much deeper. The ongoing evolution of your consciousness, expressing itself through every action. Each punch, each word, each decision becomes not just what you do, but an expression of what you are becoming. This is why I say the martial artist is an artist of life. Now, pay attention. There are 5 principles of conscious evolution I've never fully articulated until now. 5 insights that transformed my understanding of success from the ground up. These aren't techniques to be memorized. They're recognitions that, once absorbed, will change how you experience every moment. In combat, in achievement, in life itself. Are you ready to hear them? Then empty your cup once more. Because what I'm about to share might contradict everything you think you know about mastery and achievement. The first principle may surprise you. I call it strategic incompleteness. Most martial artists seek perfection. The perfect technique, the complete system, the flawless execution. They believe mastery means achieving completion. They are wrong. When I was studying Wing Chun with Yip Man in Hong Kong, I noticed something strange. The most effective fighters weren't those who performed textbook moves with mechanical precision. The truly dangerous ones left something unfinished. Their techniques contained gaps, deliberate openings that created unpredictability and adaptability. Look at classical martial systems, kung fu, karate, all of them. They aim for completeness. Every stance, every block, every strike, precisely defined and categorized. A place for everything and everything in its place. But what happens? They become rigid, predictable, crystallized. Perfection is a closed system. Strategic incompleteness creates an open channel for evolution. Let me demonstrate with something I discovered about the traditional punch. For years, I was taught to complete every motion, to extend fully, to finish each technique definitely. But I found that by deliberately leaving my punch just short of completion, by retaining that final 5% of extension, I maintained a reserve of potential energy that could be redirected instantly. This isn't sloppiness or lack of skill, it's strategic. The intentional cultivation of unfinished elements. When I created Jeet Kune Do, many criticized me. Bruce, your system isn't complete. Where are the forms? Where is the progression of belts? Where are the categorized techniques? They completely missed the point. I deliberately abandoned completeness. I learned to leave aspects of my philosophy, my art, and my understanding strategically unfinished. Not from lack of mastery, but as a source of continuous growth. This is why I ultimately walked away from formal systems entirely. When people started turning Jeet Kune Do into another style, I knew they had missed the essence of what I was expressing. Remember what I told my students? Research your own experience. Absorb what is useful. Reject what is useless. Add what is essentially your own. This isn't just advice. It's an acknowledgement that true growth requires strategic incompleteness. The moment you believe your understanding is complete is the moment your evolution stops. In Hollywood, directors wanted me to perform techniques that looked complete. Fully extended kicks, visually definitive strikes. What they didn't understand was that real combat effectiveness comes from retaining that space of incompletion, that margin that allows for adaptation, redirection, evolution. Apply this beyond fighting. In your relationships, your business, your art, wherever you seek advancement. Don't aim for completion. Aim for strategic incompleteness. Leave space for growth. Maintain gaps that can become gateways to new possibilities. The cup is useful only because of its emptiness. The room is functional only because of the space it contains. Your potential exists in what remains incomplete. The second principle goes beyond technique entirely. I call it perceptual simultaneity. Most fighters, even advanced ones, see combat as a sequence of moves. First this, then that. Attack, counter, recounter, like playing chess. Always thinking several moves ahead. This is good, but limited. When I was 18, sparring with Wong Shun Lung in Hong Kong, something unusual happened. Time seemed to expand. Instead of seeing his single attack, I suddenly perceived 5 potential movements simultaneously, not as separate possibilities, but as a unified field of energy. The experience disturbed me. I couldn't explain it. Wasn't sure if something was wrong with my perception. But it happened again during filming of Enter the Dragon. A complex fight sequence, and suddenly all possible movements existed at once in my awareness. The master doesn't see better alternatives. He sees all alternatives simultaneously. This isn't mystical mumbo-jumbo. It's a fundamental shift in perception that anyone can develop. Most people's awareness moves like a spotlight, illuminating one thing, then moving to the next, then the next. Always sequential, always divided. But what if your awareness could function more like the sun, illuminating everything at once? No movement from one focus to another, no sequence, just complete simultaneous perception. When attacked from multiple angles, the average fighter thinks, block the first punch, then counter, then deal with the second attacker. Sequential thinking. But this creates gaps, moments of vulnerability between each shift of attention. I trained myself to perceive multiple attacks as a single unified energy field. Not 3 attackers, but one 3-pointed attack. Not a sequence of threats, but a simultaneous reality to be engaged with as a whole. Success comes from transcending sequential thinking for simultaneous awareness. After my strange experience with Wong, I began experimenting with meditation practices to expand this capacity. Not traditional meditation, sitting quietly, emptying the mind. That has its place, but I developed dynamic meditation practices. Awareness exercises that expanded my perceptual field while in motion. I would stand in a room and practice being simultaneously aware of every object, every movement, every sound. Not by rapidly shifting my attention between them, but by expanding my awareness to include everything at once. On set, directors would say, "Bruce, how did you know that prop was going to fall? Or how did you sense that extra was off position?" I couldn't explain that I wasn't predicting anything. I was simply perceiving everything simultaneously. Apply this beyond fighting. In business, most see either the details or the big picture, switching back and forth. In relationships, people focus either on what they're saying or what they're hearing, never both fully. This divided perception creates blind spots. Imagine functioning from simultaneous awareness in every domain of life, perceiving problems and opportunities, strengths and weaknesses, present and future not as separate considerations, but as one unified field of awareness. This is the perceptual foundation of true mastery. Not seeing better, seeing differently, seeing wholly. The third principle cuts deeper than most are willing to go. I call it contextual identity. Most people believe they have a fixed self, a solid, unchanging core that remains constant regardless of circumstances. This is who I am. This is my style. This is my personality. As if the self were a statue rather than a river. When I first came to America, I brought this belief with me. I thought Bruce Lee was a definite thing, a specific set of attributes, abilities, and characteristics. But something unexpected happened during my early teaching years in Seattle. I noticed that my fighting style automatically transformed depending on who I was facing. Against a boxer, I became more fluid, more circular. Against a karate practitioner, I became more direct, more penetrating. Against a larger opponent, I became more evasive, more economical. At first, I thought I was just adapting tactics. But the change went deeper. My entire sense of self shifted with each context. Different opponents drew out different Bruce Lees. Your self doesn't exist independently. It emerges from the relationship between you and your context. Think about water. Does water have a shape? No. Its form emerges from the relationship between the water and its container. The same volume of water becomes a cube, a sphere, or a pyramid, depending on what holds it. Similarly, your identity isn't fixed. It emerges from the relationship between you and your environment. It's not about finding yourself, but recognizing that the self is constantly being created through interaction. I discovered that mastery comes not from solidifying the self, but from developing responsive fluidity of identity. Most martial artists try to perfect a specific version of themselves, to become the ultimate expression of a particular style or approach. But this fixation creates limitation. True mastery comes from developing such responsive fluidity that you manifest exactly what's needed in each context without attachment to consistency of self. This principle transformed everything for me, not just in combat. In acting, I stopped trying to be Bruce Lee playing a character, and instead allowed a new identity to emerge from the relationship between myself and the role. My performance in Enter the Dragon was different from Fist of Fury, not because I decided to act differently, but because I allowed different contexts to evoke different selves. In business negotiations with Hollywood producers, I noticed how my entire presence shifted, not as a tactic, but as a natural response to the environment. Sometimes I became more assertive, sometimes more receptive, not by design, but through responsive alignment with context. When teaching, I observed how different students drew out different aspects of my understanding. With an intellectual student, I became more philosophical. With a physical student, more demonstrative. I wasn't choosing these approaches. They emerged naturally from the relationship. This goes against everything society teaches about being true to yourself or finding your authentic self. The truly authentic self isn't fixed at all. It's supremely responsive, constantly emerging fresh from each new context. Remember, you are not a noun. You are a verb. Not a fixed entity, but a process in constant relationship with your environment. The fourth principle contradicts everything martial arts traditionally teaches. I call it cultivated instability. From your first day in any dojo or kwun, what do they drill into you? Stance, foundation, balance, stability. Root yourself like a tree, they say. Find your center. All martial arts systems are obsessed with perfect equilibrium. I began questioning this after watching championship boxers. They don't stand in perfect balance. They stay slightly off-center, constantly shifting, perpetually adjusting. I noticed the same in the most accomplished Hong Kong street fighters. They maintain a controlled state of apparent instability. Why? Because stability leads to stagnation. Cultivated instability creates perpetual evolution. Think about it. When you're perfectly stable, you must completely disrupt your position to generate movement. But when you maintain slight imbalance, you exist in a state of potential energy, ready to explode in any direction with minimal transition. I experimented with this idea, developing techniques where I deliberately positioned myself just at the edge of balance. My sidekick became more powerful not when I was perfectly centered, but when I allowed myself to exist at the borderline of equilibrium, the edge where control meets chaos. This principle goes far beyond physical positioning. It extends to every aspect of development and mastery. Most people establish a base of knowledge, then seek to solidify it. They reach a level of understanding and try to make it permanent, unshakable. But I discovered this approach creates rigidity of mind as well as body. I developed practices of intentionally destabilizing my understanding just as it became comfortable. When I felt I had mastered a concept, I would deliberately seek its opposite, its contradiction, its limitation. Not to disprove it, but to keep my understanding fluid, evolving. My personal ritual. Every time I became recognized for a particular skill or insight, I would abandon practicing it for a period. When everyone praised my speed, I focused instead on power. When they admired my power, I shifted to economy of motion. Not randomly, but systematically disrupting any crystallization of my development. In my library, I created a practice of reading contradictory philosophies simultaneously, never allowing a single perspective to solidify in my thinking. Western boxing and Eastern mysticism, modern psychology and ancient strategy, always maintaining controlled cognitive disequilibrium. My students found this maddening. But Sifu, they would say, last week you taught us this principle, and now you're showing us something that contradicts it. They failed to understand I wasn't being inconsistent. I was deliberately cultivating instability in their understanding. This isn't comfortable. Most seek the security of stable knowledge, fixed technique, reliable understanding. But that comfort becomes a cage. The moment you feel you've arrived at understanding, you've actually stopped moving. Apply this principle beyond martial arts. In business, deliberately question your successful strategies. In relationships, mindfully disrupt comfortable patterns. In any domain of mastery, systematically destabilize your expertise just as it becomes solid. True advancement doesn't come from building an unshakable foundation. It comes from learning to thrive within controlled instability. The fifth principle contains perhaps the most powerful insight of all. I call it energetic coherence. Most people experience themselves as divided. The physical body separate from the emotions, the intellect separate from the spirit, the conscious mind separate from the unconscious. They train each aspect in isolation. Physical training for the body, emotional control for the feelings, intellectual study for the mind, meditation for the spirit. This fragmentation creates internal conflict. The body wants one thing, the emotions another, the mind a third, and the spirit something else entirely. Most never recognize this division as the source of their limitation. In 1969, during intensive training for a role I didn't end up playing, I experienced something unexpected. For a brief moment, perhaps 3 seconds, every dimension of my being aligned perfectly. Physical movement, emotional state, mental focus, and spiritual awareness operated as a single, unified current. The power released in that moment was unlike anything I'd previously experienced. Not because I generated more force, but because nothing within me contradicted the expression. Power isn't generated, it's released through the removal of internal contradiction. Think about it. When you throw a punch with physical commitment but emotional hesitation, you create internal resistance. When you move with emotional intensity but intellectual doubt, you fragment your power. When your conscious intention conflicts with your unconscious programming, you fight yourself more than your opponent. Most martial artists try to overcome these contradictions through sheer effort, forcing the body to obey the mind, suppressing emotional signals, ignoring spiritual dimensions, but forcing alignment only creates further division. I discovered that success emerges naturally when these dimensions move as one current, rather than separate streams. This isn't about generating perfect harmony. It's about removing the artificial boundaries between these aspects of self, recognizing they're not separate systems, but different expressions of a unified whole. I developed specific practices to identify and eliminate internal contradictions. Unlike traditional training that addresses each dimension separately, these exercises were designed to reveal and resolve conflicts between dimensions. For physical emotional coherence, I created emotional flow forms, movement sequences performed while deliberately cycling through different emotional states, identifying exactly where emotions created physical constriction. For mental physical alignment, I practiced verbalizing my exact thought process during technical execution, pinpointing moments where my thinking contradicted my movement. For conscious-unconscious integration, I developed what I called dream training, programming specific technical problems into my mind before sleep, then recording and analyzing the solutions that emerged during dreams. The most powerful practice was the contradiction journal I kept by my bed. Each night I would document moments of internal division experienced that day, times when my body, emotions, mind, and spirit pulled in different directions. Then I would design specific drills to address those exact contradictions. This approach completely transformed my understanding of power. True power isn't generated through effort. It's what remains when internal resistance is removed. It's not about becoming stronger, but becoming more coherent, eliminating the divisions that cause you to work against yourself. Apply this beyond combat. In any domain, success comes not from forcing performance, but from removing the internal contradictions that limit your natural expression. Now listen carefully. These 5 principles are powerful individually, but there's a meta-principle that unifies them all, something I've never shared before. I call it recursive advancement. Most people approach principles as tools to be applied once, sequentially. First this principle, then that one, then the next. They see development as a linear path, advancing from one level to the next in orderly progression. But the deepest insight came to me while training alone one night in my backyard in Bel Air. I realized these principles aren't applied once, but folded back upon themselves indefinitely, like a dragon swallowing its own tail. Take strategic incompleteness. What happens when you apply strategic incompleteness to itself? You deliberately leave your understanding of incompleteness incomplete. This creates a gateway for continuous evolution of the principle itself, or perceptual simultaneity. When you apply it to itself, you become simultaneously aware of multiple ways of being simultaneously aware. You perceive your own perception. Suddenly, the principle generates infinite depth. This recursive pattern works with every principle. Apply contextual identity to itself, and your very understanding of identity becomes contextual, constantly reshaping itself based on new insights. Apply cultivated instability to itself, and you systematically destabilize even your practice of destabilization. Apply energetic coherence to itself, and the very boundaries between different forms of coherence dissolve. But the true power emerges when these principles begin to master each other. Perceptual simultaneity applied to strategic incompleteness lets you hold multiple forms of incompleteness in awareness simultaneously. Contextual identity applied to cultivated instability creates instability that automatically responds to context without conscious intervention. Energetic coherence applied to all other principles unifies them into a single, integrated expression. The ultimate expression isn't mastering these principles, but allowing them to master each other. This is why my approach couldn't be systematized, why people who tried to codify Bruce Lee's method always missed the essence. They tried to capture something that was designed to remain in perpetual evolution, constantly folding back upon itself, generating new dimensions of understanding. Most seek mastery as a destination, a final state of complete knowledge. But true mastery is recursive, a self-generating process that becomes more nuanced, more profound, more dynamic with each turn of the spiral. When you grasp this meta-principle, you'll understand why I say, the more I know I don't know. It's not false modesty. It's recognition that true advancement isn't accumulative, but recursive, constantly circling back to transform its own foundation, creating endless depth from finite principles. This is why there can be no ultimate system, no final technique, no perfect method. There is only the ongoing recursive process, the endless generative spiral of advancement folding back upon itself. We have reached the point where concepts must give way to direct experience, where understanding through words must transform into understanding through embodiment. Words have taken us as far as they can. Now observe, what I've shown cannot be named or captured. That unnameable quality is the true source of all achievement. Don't seek success. Become the evolution that success naturally follows.